tell me your name.
My name is Andrew Williams. Most people know me as Drew Williams. And I was born in Albany, Georgia. My parents were farmers. My father was. My father had a relatively large farm, and we come from a very large family. My family consisted of 9 boys and 7 girls. So you see, with 16 people in the family, it was a good thing to have a farm. And my father worked that farm, for years and years. And as my father became, I wouldn't say old, but at a certain stage, the doctors told him because of asthma he had to stop working the farm because of the fertilizers and all of that. And so my father turned to his large group of sons and asked them, which one of you want to take over the farm? And boy, did we have a laugh on that one. There were absolutely no takers. So then my father had stopped farming and he went to work for the government. There's a Marine base in Albany, Georgia. So my father was employed at the Marine base for many years after that until he retired. The land he owned, he would still do a small amount of farming. But then eventually he took the land and divided it up into lots, and we have a development there now. There in Albany called, I believe, College Heights or College Park or something like that. I don't get back there enough to remember, but that's how it was. As a family, we were a very close-knit family, and our parents taught us well. But my father's philosophy basically was that every tub needs to be able to sit on its own bottom. And my mother had a philosophy of, it doesn't matter whether you're male or female, you need to learn to do everything. So because of the large number of guys in the family, we had to, if there was anything at the house to be done, cooking, mopping, whatever, we had to learn to do it. And I have no regrets about that of my childhood at all. I grew up in, as I said, Albany, Georgia. And at the time, before my father took his land and developed it, when people all moved out there, we lived outside the city limits because we had a farm. And we would, in elementary school, the area that I grew up in, we had an elementary school there. I can remember well, I went from the 1st through the 7th grade in a 1-room schoolhouse. And it wasn't until the 7th grade, my last year, that we had more than one instructor. For years, the instructor we had, I didn't realize what a tremendous job that she had done. Because when I went to junior high school, I was not liking anything as far as knowledge or training or anything else. I was not behind, and I have to contribute it to that particular teacher because we didn't have the best of books. All of our books were hand-me-downs. After the white people finished with the books, then we could get them and use them. But because of her tenacity, it did not do me any harm. And to this day, I mentioned to my children, when we began to talk about school, I said, well, that's not how Mamie Daniel taught me. And so I had a tremendous time during those times. As I say now, my only regret during those times in those days, because of the circumstances, I caused my parents a great deal of consternation from the aspect of they were very concerned because the thing that they kept telling me all the time, that some white person was going to hit me in the head because my attitude at the time was not conducive to what was going on in Georgia at that time.
Let me pause you right there, because that leads into a question I've been dying to ask you since you've been describing your parents. Living out on that farm, were you and your siblings sheltered from a lot of the forces of Jim Crow and segregation that were going on from the community?
Yes, we were. Because, for instance, on the farm, and Dad had a farm, so there were certain things he didn't tolerate. And he didn't allow white men to come to the house. And it didn't really shine upon me that much until I was over to a friend's house. And the insurance man came to visit the friend, and the insurance man, he was white of course, knocked on the screen one time, opened the door, and announced that he was here. And the friend's mother came out, gave him the insurance money, etc. And that didn't sit well with me at all. And I looked at him in a very strange manner. And he turned to me and says, "Boy, what's your name? I think I probably got you in my book." And I made it very clear to him that I'm not in your book, because you don't come to our house and knock on the door and go enter in. That'll never fly in Elijah Williams' house. He was independent insurance company. He didn't like it, but there was nothing he could say. And then that's how I realized it. Really sheltered. We didn't have visitors. My father sheltered us a great deal and tried to teach us that we couldn't talk to the white man any way we wanted to. He explained that to us, but we didn't listen very well. We had come from a family we had 9 boys in that family, and we were not small kids. So we didn't pay as much attention as we should have. And I can remember growing up in high school, after working on the farm, when we stopped farming, we earned money by cutting lawns. And the only lawn we could ever cut in that day were the white people lawn, because they had the money and they wanted you to come cut their lawn. And it used to concern my mother, because the people I was working for would come pick me up. And my mother just happened to be standing there one day when the lady came to pick me up, and I got in the front seat of the car. And my mother almost had a heart attack. When I returned, she gave me a very stern lecture. And she didn't ever want to see me get in the front seat of that white woman's car again. And that was hard, because some of them, no problem. But there were those who would say, just get in the front seat. And I couldn't say, well, my mother doesn't want me to ride in the front seat of your car. So I was just hope and pray that my mother wouldn't see it, because she would say, she said, you're going to get yourself killed running behind them white women. When all we were doing was working and coming back and forth. But they had that kind of concern. But they did. They did all they could to shelter us from, the situation. And I can remember well, one job I had was at a service station. And I was always have been a very good worker. I was never, anytime I worked hard. And I never did have to hesitate when I thought I needed a pay raise or something else. But I was, doing cars and washing windows and pumping gas, and then all of a sudden one day somebody came back by and said that I forgot to put the gas cap on. And I might have, I didn't know. But the manager came out and he mentioned it to him. I said, well, I can't say. And his words to me, well, I can't afford to pay you to pump gas and buy gas caps too. I said, okay, I got a deal for you. From now on, you buy gas caps. You don't have to pay me, because I'm not working anymore. And he reported that to my parents, and they did. But I just, my father had worked too hard. He was a hard-working man. And it just always bugged me to see the lack of respect that he received. That got under my skin. I could go with him and hear something snotty-nosed little white boy saying boy or uncle. It just did not sit well. And it never did. But my parents, I realize now, they knew how to survive within that environment. And they tried to teach us how to survive in that environment. And some listened, and some of us did not listen too well.
Okay, let me pause you. Now, with the incidents that you've been telling me about, was there a build-up in your spirit of resentment toward whites because you saw the disrespect that, your father and probably your mother had to endure?
Yes. A great deal of resentment. I really, to just tell you the truth, I didn't like white folks. I had the impression we would have to, ride our bicycles. We would, go through areas where white people stayed. And I was under the assumption that even their dogs were prejudiced. White people could ride by on a bicycle and the dog would not bark. So I had concluded that even their dogs were prejudiced. And I didn't know how they were able to accomplish this. But that's just how it appeared to me. And so I didn't have, a whole lot of, love for them. And that's one good thing. We went to church every Sunday, But at the church I attended, they told us a lot about the Lord, but they didn't tell us a lot about love. They didn't teach me I was supposed to love, and they didn't teach me I was supposed to love everybody and love the man. And that was too bad, because I look back now, it wasn't being taught in a black church, but it wasn't being taught in the white church either. I ended up at Albany State as like a court of last resort. The first thing coming up in high school, as I was approaching my senior year in high school, the Air Force Academy, which was kind of new and they just started. So I decided then that this would be a good out for me. So I applied. And I had to write to my senator of the state of Georgia, Richard Russell. And I applied for he had to recommend you. And he sent me back a very nice letter. And in this letter, he explained that he was not in the habit of recommending my kind to the Air Force Academy. I mean, it was, I didn't like it, but I appreciated his frankness, He just laid it out point blank as to what life was. And I could accept that. And so the next thing I did was I applied to Morehouse. And I got accepted at Morehouse. But when it was getting close to time to go, my parents really didn't have the money to send me to Morehouse. And I realized that. And so my alternative was since I was going to go to college somewhere. So it was convenient then for me just to go to Albany State. And I had a sister working there at Albany State, So it worked out well for me. I enrolled in Albany State, never giving it a second thought, I've had disappointments, in my life before, and I basically, wherever you are, you can overcome whatever obstacle you encounter, and so I enrolled in Albany State. And I enrolled with the intention of completing my 4 years, and then going immediately to grad school, And after my master's, I was going to go forth and get me a PhD. Graduated from high school in '59, so I was there in the fall of '59. I arrived at Albany State, became known, was elected as the president of the freshman class. I didn't have any problems at Albany State per se.
So you were a well-known leader.
That's right. I was just one of those individuals. Well, if not a leader, let's say a very outspoken individual. A very outspoken individual.
Okay.
And people have a tendency to pay attention to, anybody who really don't mind speaking up.
Now, tell me this, since you say you were an outspoken leader, what were some of the things that you remember at Albany State that made it where you felt you needed to speak out?
Well, at Albany State, any time or any controversy there was, I was speaking out. I can remember we had one of the instructors was coming through the campus, and the thing is, he had a Volkswagen Beetle, and he said that his car, it seemed as if his car was just going faster than it really was. And he came down through there, and I just stopped him point blank, no reason, because he was speeding. And I didn't stop him in the nicest manner, And my sister had to explain to me that, that I just needed to be, very nice. I had a great sister. She looked out for me under all circumstances. And so I did the best I could to be very nice.
Okay. Now, tell me some of the other things that you remember about the campus, the students, and, buildings and different incidents, if any.
It was, the campus was just, straightforward. Regular students are not as motivated sometimes as I thought they ought to be, not paying as much attention sometimes as to the environment that surrounded them. You can grow up in situations and you can get to times where you just accept a lot of things. And because you accept a lot of things, it's okay. But then again, I also found out that a lot of the students, as I was told, had been briefed by their parents that, this is your only chance to go to college. So don't you go down there and start making a lot of fuss about anything. We're sending you here to study. And that's the only thing we want to hear from you, is that, you're studying. And I didn't know that. I just felt that, if there was something wrong or change needed to be made, you need to speak up. And I understand that much better now. There were a lot of great students there who were there to work hard, and they didn't speak up. And they did remain quiet. But they did because they, under the circumstances that they came to college, their intent was to get a college degree and move out to make themselves better. And as I look back, I've got respect for those much more now than I did then. But that's just what the circumstances were. And, you have to respect people for recognizing their circumstances and learning how to adjust to them, because that's what's required to be successful in life. Those things you can't control, then you learn how to accept, and live within those circumstances.
Okay.
But I had no regrets at Albany State.
Okay. Next question. As you were present in the winter of 1961 when they integrated the University of Georgia, what do you remember about the climate of things on campus during that particular window, January, February, March?
When the University of Georgia was integrated by Hamilton Hall, Hamp Hall, Charlene Hunter, it was kind of quiet. It didn't, I got excited about it, but everybody didn't. Because in the situation then, in the city of Albany and everywhere else, at the time, it wasn't one of those things that you talked a lot about. Because it was not a favorable thing. I mean, you could get in your little groups and talk about it, but it was great. And I don't remember any of my instructors really making a big thing out of it. I really don't. They might have, and I might have just forgotten, but I don't remember them making, a big thing out of the fact that, that had happened.